Welcome back to Mr. Sturgeon's classroom. Thank you for being able to get through lesson 2.3. I know it was a little bit longer than usual, but 2.3, the Constitution, again, it's super important for the AP exam and just in general to know. But we are going to continue with lesson 2.3, which is the Bill of Rights. Now, a lot of people think this is like just part of the Constitution. Technically, yes and no, it is not. This came actually after the Constitution. And what it was the first 10 amendments that were ratified after the Constitution was created. I know that sounds crazy, that just like, all right, we just created this Constitution and already there are 10 amendments. But, that's what happens. And what it was basically a way for Federalists to get Anti-Federalists on board. Because at the time, the Federalists didn't have that much support for this new Constitution. So what they had to do is they had to protect some things that the Anti-Federalists wanted. Now, this cartoon does a good job because you have a Federalist on this side who's arguing, we need this Constitution, we need it. And then this guy who's an Anti-Federalist is saying, well, the Bill of Rights does all of this, we need it, we need to add these amendments. And this guy's saying, well, it's already in the Constitution, but whatever. If it makes you happy and it gets your vote, then fine. We'll add the Bill of Rights. And that's literally like what our founding fathers were like. Hamilton at some point with Jefferson was just like, you know what, fine. If you want these things supported and protected, then fine. We'll put them in an amendment. Like the Second Amendment. You want your right to bear arms? Fine. We'll write it down in the Second Amendment that you have the right to, create a militia and bear arms. So this was strongly supported by the Anti-Federalists, these first 10 amendments. And the main idea behind this document or documents was that it protected state and individuals' rights. And we're going to go through them, not super in depth today, that will be coming later, but just a general breakdown, just like the Constitution. The amendments, there are 10 of them, at least in the beginning. And the First Amendment, obviously, probably the most important to many people. Your freedom of religion, you can believe what you want, the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, assembly, petition. So all those kind of freedoms in order to express yourself were protected in the First Amendment. The Second Amendment, very popular one with many people, it's your right to bear arms. Again, the Founding Fathers didn't maybe understand what could happen in the future, but in order to just kind of broadly protect your rights, they said in the Second Amendment, you have the right to bear arms. The Third Amendment, again, this isn't probably going to happen anytime soon, but essentially what it does is it protects people from having the government put troops in your home. Because at the time, that was a very, very popular issue. That's what the British did before the Declaration of Independence. So the Third Amendment protects the government from ever putting troops in your home. You don't need to quarter them. Again, doesn't really need to be used anymore, but still we need to protect that, freedom. Amendment 4 is, I would say Amendment 4 through 6 are very important, especially when it comes in terms of the courts and what happens with the authorities. So Amendment 4, it basically says that any stops or searches cannot happen without proper warrant. So a officer cannot search your car unless they have a warrant or probable cause. So again, there's a gray area there. Everybody thinks, I absolutely have this right. You can't look in my car. Yes, but if there is a probable cause that the officer sees, then yes, they can search your car. Or, they bring a dog in and they sniff around your car and the dog, says, something's in this car. Yes, that's probable cause. So this kind of is... It's very important, but again, there's still a gray area with this Fourth Amendment. But you do have the right to stop somebody from searching your home or your car unless they have a warrant. Amendment 5 is about criminal proceedings. It basically allows for you to have a quick and speedy trial. It makes sure, you're not sitting in jail for too long. And it also protects something called double jeopardy, where basically you cannot be tried for the exact same crime. So let's say, somebody went out and murdered another person and they were found innocent. Well, they cannot be tried again for that. Unless, again, there's a little gray area, unless obviously there's something else that comes up, something occurs, there's new evidence, whatever it is, that they can actually try it again. But overall, if you are found innocent once, you cannot be put on trial again. Again, there's a little bit of a gray area, but it's called double jeopardy. And then lastly, this is very famously, said by Dave Chappelle, and it's you're pleading the fifth. And so what that means is if you ever get arrested and you are taken into police custody and you're in that interrogation room and you don't have a lawyer present, and they're questioning you, they're saying, did you do this? Did you do this? Where were you this? You can simply say, I reserve my Fifth Amendment right. That's your right to basically not say anything. You can actually say nothing to the police officer. That is your right protected under the Fifth Amendment. Now, will that make you look kind of suspicious? Absolutely. But again, you are not self-incriminating yourself. You have said nothing to say, yes, I did this crime. So understand that not only are you protected for the most part when it comes to searches, but you are also protected when it comes to being interrogated. So the Fourth and Fifth Amendment are still very, very important in today's world. Sixth Amendment, another important amendment in terms of if you get in trouble with the law, the criminal proceedings. So things like you are supposed to be informed of your charges. So let's say you're being held at a police station past the 24-hour window or the 48-hour window, whichever it is. After that, you need to be informed of any charges that are being brought against you. You can't just be arrested to be arrested. Now, can you be detained? Absolutely. But you can't be arrested for anything unless you're actually read what charges you're being, put in jail for. You do have the right to an attorney. This is a big one. So this is kind of you think of this as the Miranda Rights Amendment. You have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford one will be provided for you. They're called public defenders. And so in terms of criminal trials, they won't put you on trial unless you have an attorney present. Can you represent yourself? Yes, but usually that's not too smart. But you do have the right to an attorney, and if you can't afford one because they can be expensive, you could have a public defender freely try to protect you. And then you have the right to a fair and impartial jury. So when you go on trial, usually there's 12 jurors, and they should be all they should be impartial. So let's say you were convicted of murder. Again, I always go the complete extreme with it, but let's say you're convicted of murder. They probably wouldn't have somebody on the jury whose, let's just say, husband was also murdered. What they also try to do is, let's just say you are a Bernie Sanders supporter, and that comes up in this trial. They might not have a Bernie Sanders supporter on the jury. That's some of the questions they ask. And basically what happens is your lawyer and their lawyer will basically go through these jurors and pick out the ones they think are the most impartial. So you do have a right to a fair jury trial. The Seventh Amendment is the right to a trial by jury shall be preserved. So that's just you have the right to a jury trial. Amendment 8 is you can't have excessive bail for your crime. So let's say you stole a pack of gum. Again, super small, but let's say you just stole a pack of gum. Your bail can't be set at like $1 million. That's too excessive. Now, if you murdered somebody, yeah, your bail might be set at $1 million. And that bail basically allows you to walk free until your court date. And then again, nor cruel or unusual punishment inflicted. So obviously you can't be tortured. There are things that happen in places like Guantanamo Bay where there is torture that can happen, but technically the argument with that is that it is not on U.S. soil. It's in Cuba, which allows this amendment to kind of be forgotten. So that's the Eighth Amendment. So it does protect you when you are imprisoned, and there can't be any unusual punishments inflicted. The Ninth Amendment, we have rights even if they're not in the Constitution. So you have rights, but again, not every right is in the Constitution, but it is protected. So there are certain, rights that you have, like your right to an opinion, that's protected under the Constitution. So there are, if it's not in the Constitution, it's still protected. And then the Amendment 10, which is probably for the next couple units, the one we're going to focus on a lot, it basically says any power not specifically given to the national government is given to the states. So if the national government never puts something in the Constitution about marriage, well, then the states are in charge of marriage laws. If the national government never put anything in charge of, let's just use divorce, well, then states are in charge of divorce laws. So that's the 10th Amendment. We'll cover that much more in depth later on in another unit. But let's look at the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Let's see what it did. So we had the articles that we replaced. Some of the issues that we've covered: weak central government. They couldn't levy taxes or regulate the commerce. And they had a very weak military. 3 big weaknesses. Let's see what this new Constitution and government has created. Well, now we have a strong central government with 3 branches that are all separate, that can check one another. So we have a very strong central government in place. Check. Number 2, now the government can tax. It can also regulate commerce. So boom. Another big check. Now we can have money to actually run our country. And then lastly, it created a national military. So now we finally have a nationalized military where our government doesn't need to go to Massachusetts and ask for troops. Now it can create its own military from troops from each state. So no longer would there be like the Massachusetts militia and the Georgia militia. Now it's just under one national military. So the 3 big weaknesses from the articles, our founding fathers looked at them and said, you know what? Let's make sure all those weaknesses are covered in this new Constitution. And that's exactly what they did with the articles and the Bill of Rights. Remember, the Bill of Rights came after the Constitution. It was one of those things that was added because the Federalists needed more support from Anti-Federalists. So these rights, these 10 amendments, were just things that every person should be entitled to that wasn't necessarily spelled out directly in our Constitution. Now, for the next lesson, we are going to be talking about the separate branches more in depth, like I promised. So when we talked about the Constitution, we kind of glossed over the first 3 articles. Well, in this next lesson, 2.5, we are going to be talking more in depth about those branches, specifically their jobs, and how they can kind of check the other branches. Thank you and enjoy.